You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to Digging Up Ancient Aliens. This is the podcast where we examine strange claims about alternative history and ancient aliens in popular media. Do their claims hold water to an archaeologist, or are there better explanations out there? We are now on episode 61, and I am Fredrik, your guide into the world of pseudo-archaeology. And if you have missed it, Professor Flint Dibble out of Cardiff University went on the Joe Rogan podcast to debate the famous Graham Hancock. Well, I have a sneaking suspicion that you have, already heard about this and probably heard a bunch of takes already, like from my podcast neighbor, Dr. Andrew Kinkella, who also have a show here on the Archaeological Podcast Network. I can't really help that Joe Rogan scheduled this to release basically the same day as my last episode, meaning we were about 2 weeks out until, a new show would come. It's almost like there's some sort of conspiracy going on here. But don't turn this episode off thinking there will be nothing new here, because my take might not be like the others that you have heard. It will be a bit more critical. I'm also joined by Professor Howard Williams, also known as ArchPodNet, over at TikTok and on YouTube. Or rather, I joined him on a live talk when this just released. So the first section of this episode will basically be me reflecting a little bit now sometime after the debate took place, and then Professor Williams will join me in the second part of all of this. And if you want to hear the full raw chat with Williams, you should sign up over on Patreon or at the members portal, just as a few lovely supporters already have done, and something I'm extremely grateful for. So with those people butted up, I guess there's nothing more than to remind you that sources can be found on diggingupancientaliens.com. So now when we have finished our preparation, let's dig into the episode. So, first of all, I'm not particularly eager to rain on someone's parade. I also hope to be proven wrong a little bit in some things I bring up here, and that's not something I say often on this show, but I genuinely wish that I'm shown to be incorrect and that, this debate turns out to be a huge success. I'm skeptical, and you will learn why in just a few moments. I also have to admit that I don't really enjoy either Joe Rogan or Graham Hancock from the start. I never really understood Rogan's popularity or why someone would want to listen to these long shows where the host doesn't know what they're talking about. I understand that the show's selling point is that Rogan is just your average bloke, a regular Joe, one might say, who is just asking questions and engaging in conversations like everybody else. However, Joe Rogan is far from like everyone else. Rogan operates one of the largest podcasts out there. He has some 14 million subscribers on Spotify and 16 millions on YouTube. And these are not the numbers of your average Joe. As we will see, these numbers should put some journalistic pressure on Joe Rogan, something he doesn't really like to take upon himself. And that unwillingness to do proper journalistic work will, of course, affect his audience and how they might respond to different claims. Now, with this large platform in mind, it's not strange that Dibble or any other historian or archaeologist would like to use this to spread good information. The setting we got, however, was that science-based archaeology and Graham Hancock's unproven fantasies are equal. This is because for it to be a debate, there need to be two sides whose ideas are, to at least some extent, viewed as equal or equally possible. As Brian Dunning puts it, the very nature of a debate presents science as if it's merely a competing opinion. In an article published in Sapiens, Dibble discusses his thoughts and goals regarding the debates before him. Dibble also bring up a Bill Nye's debate with Ken Ham and how some experts refer to this being a mistake, but in reality, as Dibble put it, it was a way to make information accessible for the younger generation, and now the acceptance of evolution is above 50% among the US population. And I want to point out that this debate is a little bit of a double-edged sword. The acceptance of evolution had been on rise since well before this debate took place. Sure, it kind of peaked around 2014 when the debate took place, but it's worth mentioning that the belief has been in decline since then. And it also, well, the term belief will, of course, affect how people answer these polls in studies. And Suffolk University, in one of the most recent polls on the subjects from 2023, showed that 53 of those questions believe in some version of evolution, and 37% don't believe in evolution at all. So it seems as we are barely holding on to the lead. As for the further backside of the debate, it did help Ken Ham restart his funding campaign for the Ark encounter. With the media attentions, donations start to come in again, and the park could open in 2016. And since then, it's been costing Kentucky taxpayers large sums of money in different tax incentives, and the park has tried to re-register as a non-profit religious entity since then to, not pay more taxes than they really have to. The park is also open for schools to visit, and tours are offered to school children, and there are, when I go online, evidence that schools are in fact coming to the Ark encounter. And while the Ark encounter might not be the financial and anti-success that Ham hoped for, it's still a place that promotes young Earth creationism, and quite successfully, I might add there. So while there are initial benefits, the aftermath down the road is a bit more murky and tricky than we might expect from all of this. And it will be hard to say what and if there is any upsides or downsides from Dibble's debate with Hancock, a decade down the road. And with this said, I'm not claiming that we should not engage with believers in pseudoscience. Not at all. The editor of The Skeptic and several times Skeptic of the Year, Michael Marshall, makes a good case for engaging with these people, and he himself does it rather successfully in his podcast, Be Reasonable. And it's an excellent example on how we can engage with these people while maintaining a certain amount of control. Marshall does a great job navigating this discussion and knows when and how to push these promoters of false scientific claims, a skill that was very much lacking from Rogan in Dibble's debate with Hancock. Joe Rogan can't really host a conversation on complex topics as been shown historically. It's clear from other episodes with Rogan, who tends to have on personalities promoting false and dangerous ideas, and these include Milo Yiannopoulos, Alex Jones, Gavin McInnes, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Graham Hancock, Jimmy Corsetti, and Charles C. Johnson. And Rogan has repeatedly failed to push back against what these people say. Monica Hesse in Washington Post wrote about how Joe Rogan, for example, failed to push back against Charles C. Johnson's claims that black people were more prone to violence. And Rogan also struggles with fact-checking guests' claim while they're on air and mostly seem to Google keywords that the guests give him, or rather, Rogan's assistant, or whatever he is, Google the keywords that the guest gives them. This, for example, results in Robert F. Kennedy convincing Joe that what Kennedy said about vaccines being dangerous are true, and that was because Rogan's assistant didn't realize when entering the keywords given by Kennedy that they ended up on a web page created by Kennedy in the first place. Monica Hesse describes the scenario very well in her column in the Washington Post. He, Joe Rogan, is not nimble enough or forethinking enough to engage in intellectual battle with guests who are not there to seek truth but to recruit converts. And this is something again visible in Dibble and Hancock's debate, that Rogan often felt inept in asking piercing questions, especially towards Graham Hancock. While some claim that Rogan seemed more convinced by Dibble towards the end, I'm unsure if I really agree with that statement. Maybe more becoming warmer as they got to know each other, maybe, but I can't really claim to know what happens in Rogan's head. The conspiracy-prone guest also affects those who listen to Joe in general, since those are the people that kinda often drive more traffic to Joe's content. And if we focus in on who really listen on Joe Rogan's podcast, a majority of those are white conservative males. They are more prone to not trusting vaccine nor the media. While Dibble knows he won't convert the hardcore Graham Hancock fans, it is still an uphill battle with Rogan's core audience in mind. While one study has shown that what's called a fact sandwich might help convince some people regarding claims in a political debate, I'm not sure if that really is applicable to a setting and complex topic as this is. When it comes to this sort of audience, we might need a different approach. Peter Bogusane suggests that we need to get these people to ask themselves, what evidence would it take to change my mind? Because from there, these people can then embark on a journey and start to apply skeptical thinking as they gain more knowledge. But they have to start this voluntarily, and they need to be open to changing their minds to start with. Something maybe white conservative males, not trusting neither media or vaccines, might have a bit of an issue to do without a bit of further assistance. I'm not sure how many might have changed their minds in the Dibble v. Hancock debate. That's a dirty little secret with debates we all try to ignore to some extent. We go into them with our minds made up and most often leave with the same minds intact. I've seen posts on Twitter and Facebook that there are threads on Hancock's subreddit where fans of Hancock claims that Hancock didn't really won this one. As one who is lurking in several Reddits and Telegram places, I can't say that I've seen that. I went to Hancock's subreddit and did find some posts claiming that Dibble won and Hancock lost this one, but most of those comments seem to come from account posting skeptical content in general on this subreddit. So for the most part, inside this alternative history forum, it seems as Hancock were the one they claimed won. While he was tired, he did show those academics in their ivory tower that Hancock can't be silenced and they can't answer his questions and they are just trying to paint him as a racist and all of that. And, well, that's also a common outcome. Your favorite always win the debate. Everyone's a winner. So, Joe Rogan has an enormous platform, but will it really benefit us going there? Is it worth it for us to sit down with a transphobe with a history of racist remarks? I have to acknowledge that we have those among us, among the science educators, and even among the archaeology and history educators that have made transphobic remarks. And that's something we should deal with ourselves. But striving to be on Rogan won't really help us as much as we think. It kind of downplays our own impact, even if we don't have these Netflix specials and Rogan. We have so many brilliant creators and people who are out there making amazing educational content. Milo from Mini Minute Man has videos with several millions of views. Annalise Bear has videos with several millions of views. And not to brag, even I have some short videos with several millions of views. All of that without promoting bigots or pseudoscientists. We should be proud of this and see our own value as a community. Instead of driving traffic to Rogans and the Hancocks of the world, let's drive traffic to a place where it actually would matter. Let's start a stipend or something that could help educators improve their production value in their content, get help with their content, improve research or whatever, or get funds so we can start pitch good history shows to the production companies. I think somewhere among that is a better way forward. When we engage with these people, however, we should do it in a setting where we are in control, and we need to take more pride among ourselves and see that we actually really have value even without Joe Rogan. And after the break, we will have Professor Howard Williams here and discuss the debate more in depth. Fellow archaeology lovers, science nerd and history enthusiast, have you ever dreamt of showcasing your passion for our history and science? Dig no further. Welcome to the official merchandise store for your favorite podcast, Digging Up Ancient Aliens. Embark on a journey through time with our exclusive collection. Wrap yourself in the mysteries of the past with our range of themed shirts, mugs, and apparel. Each piece tells a story about your passions and podcast preference. And for the devoted archaeology aficionados, unveil our latest treasure, the Archaeology Mafia t-shirt. It is more than just apparel. It's a statement, a tribute to those who dig deeper, question the unknown, and unravel the secrets of our ancestors. These are not just merchandise. They are future relics from a time yet to be fully understood. Symbols of your dedication to unveiling the truth behind ancient aliens and the real wonders of our past. Join the crew of Digging Up Ancient Aliens, wear your curiosity, flaunt your knowledge, and join the Archaeology Mafia. Visit our store now and you will get an offer you can't refuse. Let's keep the spirit of exploration alive. Log on to diggingupancientaliens.com/store and grab your piece of history. Remember, the past is always present.
To getting Digging Up Ancient Alien up here because they are an expert in this. I'd love to hear their Hey! How are you?
I'm doing well, laughing at your points about watching the full 4 hours. I have to admit, I didn't watch the full 4 hours.
I felt I had to. I'm a bit of a, there's, if I don't have many qualities to my personality, but dedication is one of them. I will see it through to the end. I felt I started, so I have to finish. But I know that your podcast is nowhere near like that. And that's what depresses me, is that, other people's podcasts and other formats are much more engaging. And I was just really disheartened by how slow and meandering. And anyway. Yeah, let's move on to the actual content, though. What did you think? This must have been just standard stuff for you, really, wasn't it?
For me, I recognize a lot of it, and I don't really want to sound mean because I respect Flint and all of that. But to be honest, he wouldn't be my first choice in a debate with Graham Hancock. There's a lot of engaging media personalities like Dr. Kinkella from the Archaeological Podcast Network. He's a very charismatic, engaging speaker with a lot of one-liners and things that makes radio interesting. And the thing with these type of engagement is that you have to be able to summarize stuff on sound bites. And that's hard to do with a very debunking format as he's trying to approach there. I think the information he had in most cases were very good, very informative. And I mean, I'd love to watch his lectures in general from Flint, but in this, I think he fell a little bit short because that's the upside with making things up. You can just make things up and move on if you get pressured. For example, the Yonaguni monument that they discussed quite a bit isn't really an archaeology topic. That's a geologist maybe that should speak about it. I mean, while we understand stones and rocks and all that, a geologist will be more capable on, presenting on why this is natural, how we see this in other formations like the Devil's Tower and all of that. And same with, he brought up Bimini Road, for example.
Yes.
That's Graham's crown jewel because it's a very nice place to diving, I guess. But he often talks about Bimini Road and how it shows that there is a sunken location and that these structures we see there, others and geologists have been able to show that this is beach rock. They are naturally formed over a couple of thousands of years. And they even, contrary to Graham Hancock's claims, they have even tested the stones. They have made radiocarbon dating on the organic materials inside the stones. Again, since they form during a pretty short time period, you get organic materials enclosed within these rocks. And the archaeologists and geologists have dated these rocks to be about 1000 BCE, basically. So they are quite new and we know exactly what they are, but yet they spend, I think that section was about 15 minutes or so, or because it's laid out in a straight formation. I've been on a lot of beaches in Albania. I saw these unnatural beach roads too, because it's a natural thing. Yeah. You get straight lines in nature. I mean, I'm not sure why they spent so much time on that particular question. And
not just Hancock and Dibble. I mean, Joe Rogan just go looking at the screen going, but it looks like a straight line. Yes, it's like, has you ever looked at any rock face ever? They have fractures, they have sediment. It was really frustrating to think, are there people out there who buy into this? It looks weird. It kind of looks like an object. And that was just, okay, go on. Sorry.
I mean, and I'm not sure if Flint ever brought it up or Graham, but I like the Pure Race map because Graham Hancock loves Pure Race map.
They did get around to that. Yeah, it came up briefly, and Flint said, perhaps you should get some GIS expert to actually rectify it to see how close it was. And then it just went, and then they just moved off. So it didn't really.
Why is because if Graham Hancock can't control that narrative, it's very easy to debunk that map. And
I've seen your video,
24 years ago by McIntosh is the professor. He wrote a book going through every single centimeter of that map. And you have the translation on the left-hand side of the map showing his sources. And especially when he comes to Bimini Road, Graham Hancock claims, for example, the island of Bimini is represented, but then he points to the island of Hispaniola that's depicted as the island of Japan because that's where they first thought they had landed when they arrived to the Americas. But so it's a very easy thing to debunk if you know what you're talking about. And there I think Flint didn't really read up. Same way when it came into the discussion if Graham Hancock is racist or that his writing is problematic and racist. There was a lot of things that he missed out that he could bring up and should have brought up and maybe read up on. For example, he has written some very problematic books with Robert Bauwal that he brought up in the episode. One is called, I have it in my notes here, The Master Game, or also known as The Talisman, Secret Cities, Secret Faith. That's basically is David Icke, but a little bit lighter in the format. So it's very anti-Semitic, and they have this secret religion that controls everything. They never say Jews until the last section of the book, where they actually say that this is some sort of Masonic experiment we see here in the United States government when they're trying to get.
And Hancock was co-author, was that?
Yeah.
Or was that just? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God. Right.
So, so I mean, there is problematic stuff if you read up on him a bit more than I think Flint unfortunately didn't do. But that book is also very hard to come by. I don't think it's even published any longer. Don't quote me on that though. But yeah, he has a lot of these David Icke influence if you go through and read his material. I mean, he is the best author, at least, Graham Hancock, among the alternative history people, but that's not really much. He also claimed that he's not promoting alien theories, except, again, Hancock wrote a book claiming that there was an ancient civilization on Mars that got struck by a meteor and then died out, and there's some connection between Mars and Earth ancient civilization.
Oh gosh, right. I forgot about that. Right, okay, yeah.
1998, The Mars Mystery is that book called, where he go into detail, and it might be a connection that the Martians came here. So he's ancient alien, but not on the same level as Van Daniken and Zachariah Sitchin and those authors. And he has more spiritual connection to the aliens. That's why he drink ayahuasca and those a bit more psychedelic drugs, because he thinks through that he can speak with the aliens. They are not real aliens, but they are, psychic aliens that can communicate across the galaxy. So again, he's not ancient alien as Van Daniken. They come here, They built the pyramids with levitation devices. They talk to humans through these drugs instead, so to say.
That's I mean, that was missing in the. I thought there were pulled punches, is what you're saying, and I think whether it was, I mean, if I was going to concede something, I'll say I couldn't have done that, and that the breadth you need, the breadth of geographical span of these grifters is such that you need a handle, because they'll suddenly shift, and later on near the end he's going, Angkor Wat comes up, and then he's back to Egypt, and you can't keep up with that pace of constant moving, like a little dance. And so it some of it, I would say, I think there are other archaeologists could have, and I think there would be good, healthy conversations breaking this down. But I thought there were lots of pull punches. And the most frustrating one I share is the white supremacy, because Hancock is pretending not. I mean, if he was had written one book, but he's pretending that he doesn't understand anything about the history of the world and Europe since the 19th century, how the growth of science and archaeology is part of that, and anthropology happened, that he's pretending to be blissfully ignorant of any of the sources of these ideas. And I thought that not being held to account properly on that, and just conceding, no, I'm not calling you a white supremacist, Graham, I'm not calling you a racist, Graham. I thought at one level, I think maybe a canny thing to do in the studio. But at the end of the day, you have to call people to account who are picking up books written by long discounted and discredited authors from different disciplines from the 1890s, 1960s, and just cobbling them together. I mean, I don't think there's that was a satisfactory moment, really. I felt that very frustrated on that point. Yeah.
No, and as you say, I can understand why you don't want to sit in a studio setting where you might feel a bit alone, since, Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan are quite close to each other. I'm not sure that they are best pals, but, he has been on several times, so he probably have a bit more rapport than, for example, Flint and others. But while he might not be a racist, that he goes out marching in the streets with one arm up and all that, that's not the point. The point is what he writes leads down racial radical slippery slope. You start with Graham Hancock, and then all of a sudden you are in the alt-right milieu that we have seen. And even if he doesn't promote racist idea, he does that in the sense that the sources that we use and the language he uses when quoting these sources are inherently racist, nationalistic, and problematic.
Well, the problem with Hancock for me is that, and there was lots of issues with, a lot of this was not new to me, but one of the things that I was really struck by is he wants a rarefied conversation where he's not making any money and there's no social political context for anything he says. He wants to be in this world where it's a white guy striding around the landscape, exploring the world, listening to the locals, thanks to his wife being able to speak the Tamil languages. He has that insider knowledge through, risking his life. Always, about 15 times he said about the personal dedication, the personal risk, the dives he's done. He's put his life at risk. His wife put herself at risk getting in a helicopter to take a photograph of the Sphinx. Apparently that puts her life at risk going in a helicopter. But that level is that personal. He wants that journey, but he won't. There's no responsibility. There's no context for him. He wants to be able to sit there as without any self-critical reflection. So I generally think he is surprised, whether you call it ignorance, arrogance. I think he generally doesn't think there is a world out there reading his books, giving him the money. And he says at one point, I never ask for grants, only those generous people who buy my books, as if they care about his person. It's bizarre, sort of. It's like rock star. It's like someone who's never, it's this kind of, when The Rock and Oprah, said, "Oh, give your money to help people in Hawaii." We're not, but you can. It's that kind of disconnect from reality type scenario where he's happy to say, "Oh, archaeologists have got agendas because they've got their positions," but he doesn't seem to have any self-criticism of his social, political, economic context, and that was a real shock. But also, he generally has internalized that. He doesn't see himself as accountable for anything he does. And Joe Rogan brought that up himself when Flint Dibble was doing can I show you some quotes of the people that support your views, Graham? And Joe went, no, we're not doing that because they're just people. If you say anything in the public, people will respond. They're just people. Like they're the grunts, the minions. Their views are not my problem. Right. And at one level, I think there's a valid point there that, Graham Hancock isn't responsible for every crazy on the planet. But if you are producing best-selling books and this is feeding a particular narrative, surely you have to answer to that. If you realize your music or your theatre performances or your stage plays or whatever are only appealing to a particular demographic, at some point you have to say, maybe there's something in what I'm doing that's a bit off. Why is it only white guys turn up to my political events, or whatever, or my lecture tours or whatever it may be. I don't know. It is absolutely, I will not be held to account. I will not be put in context. I am floating free as an independent white guy. There's probably a better phrase for it, but you know what I'm getting at. It's that sort of, that really got
exactly. Yeah. He wants to be that his view are supposed to be viewed in a vacuum, and since he just asking questions, he can't really be criticized for it. Kind of thing. And that's why it would have been interesting with another or additional people in the archaeology camp, because there's a lot of archaeologists that still risk their lives. I remember again Dr. Kinkella, who told on his show how he when he was studying one of the what's it called, kind of lost the word for it, one of the sacred ponds in down in Guatemala. I'm blanking completely on the name, but the Maya ponds, how he slept in the jungle, and one night he heard jaguars roaming past his sleeping bag. There's a lot of interesting stories that archaeologists still can tell, because we put ourselves in strange places all the time. So, but he wants that too, but Graham Hancock don't want to put in the work and effort. I wandered into a animal pen that I thought was empty, but had 10 bulls in it, and never ran so quick in my life. So,
The worst I've had is accidentally wandering into a field with a Swedish ram in it. And I was looking for a Bronze Age cemetery in Öland. And then I thought, oh, it's not just a big sheep, it's a ram. And we had a confrontation. But anyway, this is true. And he wants this idea. He wants to be seen as an academic. He wants to be seen as an adventurer. And he talks about scientific expeditions, exploring. If you've experienced the site, he says to Flint Dibble at one point, well, have you been to the site? Well, I've been there. I've been there.
Yeah, Flint
goes, what's that got to do with it? And he also talks about when he's reading the scientific papers, he wants to be a scientist. He's relying on all this stuff and talks about how he reads it in depth, rigorously. I've read it all. He speaks his truth. And that's the other thing is like, so if someone has a crazy idea and I just go, well, that's my truth. And it reminded me very much of the Vikingo, the Norseman TV show, comedy TV show, where he's always going, well, that's my truth. So really
And I mean, that's kind of his thing that he claims to have read a lot. I don't think he wants to be academic in that sense, or he has shifted sense. But Jeb Carr put out a good article showing his Graham Hancock's how he don't want to be viewed as academics or criticize him as being a wannabe academic or wannabe archaeologist. Might miss the point, but there's a different discussion. But as you say, he is quite selective with his sources. He claimed to read stuff, but if you remember the Quetzalcoatl discussion they had, he brings up David Carrasco, who argues that Montezuma and Aztec fell because they had this idea of Quetzalcoatl coming back. But modern scholars have shown that this is a after fabrication by the Spanish conquistadors. So he, bringing up David Carrasco, still held this belief. And you also have H. Nicholson that also promoting this idea, and John Paul is a third author that still promotes this idea. But then you have all the other scholars that, have started to point out that this isn't really the real history of it, leaving out Restall, Lockhart, Gespear, Townsend, Breakheart, Smith, Growlish, and there's a lot more on that who actually put in the research, put down the work, but they don't promote his idea. So he don't mention these authors because, well, he likes to cherry pick data that confirms his preferred narrative, as many of these alternative historians do, so to say.
Perhaps the best bit of Flint Dibble's contribution was the fact that he had video clips from indigenous archaeologists saying some of that. So it wasn't just him, but, that was probably the most effective bit. And Hancock didn't have anything to respond on that, because it was just like he had the rug pulled from under him. But I think it's difficult in a 4 hours, 26-minute, discussion to expect any individual academic to respond to that. I mean, just to those that joined late, I was saying that, if I gave an hour lecture in that style, the students would be, literally throwing things at me, or they'll probably have all crept out while I was just droning on. But the fact that there's an audience for this kind of dry, unstructured, rambling conversation. Can you get this thing up on screen? I can't believe it. It's so almost celebrating their ineptitude with technology. I mean, all of them, Flint included, to be frank. I thought they were all just a bit, all over the show with the tech and everything. But I mean, the one thing I wanted to ask you about was, do you think this was do you think this is a big moment? I mean, Hancock seemed to think himself it was a big moment, because he said, in 30 years, this is the first time anyone's debated me. And he did at the end, there's a good section of concessionary. Why must you always attack me? Can't we just sit down and have a meeting of minds? Can't you just entertain their other views? But he doesn't want other views. He wants his view. And so there's that contradiction. So I don't know. Do you feel, and that wasn't challenged really. So, what's your take on this? Is there a meeting of minds? Is there conciliatory, more informed dialogue to be had? Or is he just wanting space to be taken seriously and to be taken legitimately as, I don't know.
I mean, he's leaving out that he debated Havas previously. So I mean, there's other who have agreed to debate him, but
right, okay.
Savi Havas debated him in Egypt, but he got quite upset because Hancock, doing his racist stuff, and Havas did not really have the temperament for having that type of discussion with Hancock. So he got a little bit upset. But for me, it was more important for Hancock than for archaeology.
Yeah.
While I know that I read Flint's article presenting why he goes on, and he brings up Bill Nye versus Ham on the creation.
Yes, I read that, yeah.
While Flint say that, now we have less creationists, that's due to this debate. It's truth with modification. That curve was heading up steadily way before that debate even was planned or took place. So that more helped sponsor creationist education material, and it's still up through the Creationist Museum. They earn money when you go and watch it and everything. So you still sponsor bad science by watching then, and both sides thought they won. Technically, Bill Nye, from a debate perspective, won fair and square, but Ham thinks he won, and his follower thought Ham won, and Bill Nye's follower think Bill Nye won. And I think when I've been reading about this debate online, the comment sections, again, archaeologists or people in the archaeology sphere seems to think that Flint Dibble took home the throne. He won everything fair and square. If you go into the alternative forums and Telegram channels and all that, Hancock won, of course. So, I mean, there wasn't really much exchanging of ideas. No. They talked over each other more than with each other. And Flint, or Graham Hancock rather, got opportunity to be seen with a real archaeologist and promote his idea fair and square, and then he can go back and point, but he was rude to me during this. Do you see how he laughed at me when I said that? And they don't take me serious. So he gets new material for his victimhood role that he had been playing since his early journalist career. In 1980, he claimed in his books that he was silenced by the government and all of that. So, I mean, he has played successfully the victimhood card throughout his career. He wants to be the victim, someone who they don't listen to and all of that. But at the same time, engaging with him is a little bit water on a goose. It just runs off and then he takes what he likes, so to say. And it's hard to have a debate with someone who is not grounded in reality in that way. I read his books. I've seen some weird claims in his books, and I've several times encountered that he just make up sources.
Yeah.
And it's hard to argue with someone who take the liberty, I'm citing this person. You go to that book, look up the source, don't mention what he's claimed that these sources mention. I mean, it's hard to have a serious discussion with someone who don't pay attention to the source material to start with.
Really hard to play. It's the pigeon chess, or you can't. It's really difficult to play against a game with someone who doesn't want to play by the rules and will come up with anything. And this is like the whole problem with Trump in the political debates. Well, how do you have a political debate with someone who will just literally make stuff up on the spot about to cover themselves on particular points? And that's one of the things that I did find very frustrating, because not only wasn't he held to account about the white supremacy, there were great individual points made. But I thought that not the lack of any engagement with the history of the subject and the theory of what archaeology is, and a grand narrative. Because while Flint was able to push back on, really good points about the dating of the origins of agriculture, what Flint lacks, and this is something I'm only at my stage of my career only starting to get, is that grand ability to just synthesize a big point. Like I'm not the best at it, but I'm getting there. But that, and of course, this was thousands of years after the Younger Dryas, and we've got to remember that this was going on, and we've got and really charismatically pull an alternative, positive narrative of what archaeology is showing us. Yeah. And that didn't come out because Flint's approach was all about empirical. No, but the data shows, and really that fulfills a stereotype of archaeology that we are just interested in. But no, you've got the wrong color of potsherd. Or, oh no, there's a few extra sites. It's big data. It's complicated. And I do this myself. I'm guilty of this too. But I'm just saying that in that venue, the onus is on a big name archaeologist, really, and it's unfair on someone like Flint, I think, to take on this, because you need a big Renfrew-like figure to go, no. What we've got to understand is this is, and to really sell back a big story of what's going on. And I don't think I could do that. I'm not saying Flint's I couldn't do it, but I think it's a really tough thing to do. And I think it really needed that for that venue, for that level of audience. There needed to be some big sound bites of, the story of, Flint said all the key points about the diversity, complexity of early societies and climate change and so on. But I just felt it lacked that bam, that this is the big story, the dawn of civilization, type, narrative, because that's the kind of narrative that they will get. They want that. Rogan wants that. And where Rogan sort of really pricked up and listened to Dibble was when he did deliver a few of those bits and pieces. Rogan was going, yeah, I see that now. Yeah. So I don't know. I just felt that was a missed opportunity for sort of big narrative points. But
that really shows that we kind of need to have more media training, even in our field, and encourage students to go and take classes in media editing, how to behave. And also, while we should focus on being able to present complicated data, we also need to start to remember we have to be able to sometimes do it in sound bites. You can't really spend 5 minutes talking on a point, and on the radio that doesn't work, or on TV you need to be able to say something concrete within 1-2 sentences that you can cut it out, you can put it on the internet and gain listeners. It's something I too are very bad on. I don't think I would have done much better than Flint, because I have this longer, I want to go through all the details that I know about, but you have to say quick and easy points and bring these large, complicated narratives down to a simple thing that people can remember and repeat. They won't remember your 10 minutes small lecture on why early agriculture showed that human evolution went this way and not Graham Hancock's way. But you need to be able to have that one-liner. But that require a bit more of those in our fields that want to go out in media. We need to practice more and look at TV personalities, take courses in presenting. I know that I'm quite lousy in live speak and can go on longer rants, but we kind of have to take help from those who are professional and encourage students that's coming now, the next generation, to be more online, to take these discussions and be media literate in not just how to consume the media, but how to present on the media. And while I'm not a big fan of Milo, I don't remember his last name.
Stefan Milo?
And Mini Minuteman. Yeah. His style isn't really my style that I enjoy in content, but it's the style that the youth today can look at, and they seem to take a liking to him, which is something we need to look at and take our lessons from, because he's very great on taking these large, complex narratives, boil them down to a very short soundbite, and still not be horrible wrong, because that's another trap with these soundbites, that if you boil a complicated term or topic down too much, then you might misrepresent it anyway because you made it a bit too simplified. But we need to be able to balance these type of things.
I happen to think that Flint did well at presenting the evidence we have for Paleolithic societies, which Hancock just denies are there, and for going through the most effective bits were the early bits where he goes through the land-based archaeology, the underwater archaeology, and the origins of agriculture later on. But I suppose for me, my frustration was, while it's good that he stepped up and did this, it challenges misinformation, it takes the fight to these venues. He did make far-ranging and effective points, but at the end of the day, I almost felt that Hancock won. It's not a winning game. No one won. Yeah, I agree with you. No one won. but frankly, at the end of the day, Hancock has this kind of old man. He's British, but he's got that kind of American lilt. He's got that international style. Speaks with a kind of like, I'm kind of a bit American. I've been on the media. He's got that whole patter. And he's not dressing up. Whereas, I don't know Flint. I've never really engaged with him at all on social media, but he did come across as, and a lot of the comments reflected this. People were just commenting on him as a bit of a stereotype of a sidekick from various TV shows. And I don't. Now, I'm not trying to be personal about his appearance, his accent. I have every respect for him as a professional academic, but I think in that venue, people are going to fixate on that kind of things in the same way that they'd fixate on my appearance or your appearance. We needed someone who was perhaps not fitting into, and I know I fit into various stereotypes of an archaeologist. I don't want to comment on you, but you know what I'm getting at is that perhaps we needed someone who was just not going to be immediately put in a box as, oh, here's another. Guy.
Archaeologist, a bit more younger, like American archaeologists would have been better. I agree with you there. He came off as quite, me and Dr. Kinkella had a quite interesting discussion, must have been 2 years ago, 1 year, where we discussed who would we want to see debating Graham Hancock, because he had, challenged hopes from, I think he's from Kansas University, but challenged hopes have been quite critic of Hancock for a very long time, and that Graham Hancock doesn't like, but he don't want to debate. So we discussed who would we want to see, and what we did agree on is that we don't want someone who looks stereotypical archaeologist and talk about the data. Something a bit more bigger, so to say.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was, I think we, as a discipline, we do fulfilled a lot of popular expectations in not necessarily a positive way following that, because I did end up feeling, without getting personal, that we end up with a situation where we are seen as elitists. It's in the family business. That kept coming up again and again. Most of the archaeologists I know are first generation, or in the British sense, working class. I think that wasn't reflected. And I think, it is, we do need to think about moving forward. I mean, I don't know whether in the grander scheme of things, this matters at all. And I did think it was good at the very end that Flint and Graham agreed on the value of university education in archaeology in the face of cuts, that there was an agreement that looting sites is bad, and there was an agreement that museums and heritage sites shouldn't have their funding cut. And that was perhaps the biggest positive thing, is that terrorists and cartels loot archaeological sites, and Graham agreed that that's true, and that universities and museums, and even Joe Rogan went, why are they shutting down humanities? Like, again, living in an utter bubble. The world doesn't affect Joe Rogan, doesn't affect Graham Hancock, but even they could agree that on principle, museums are good things, universities training archaeologists are good things, and that looting sites is bad. That was at least, and that's a low bar. That's a low bar, but at least, I suppose, if 4 hours 26 minutes, if there's 5 minutes at the end that's positive, that's something, I guess. But it's really, beyond that, it wasn't a great, a moment of great. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about was that Hancock is genuinely upset. And he said near the end that Flint Dibble personally is the person that's hurt him the most with his comments. And whether that's true or not, he genuinely feels like he's been attacked on levels that he just doesn't understand. Why would anyone call me a white supremacist? Why would anyone link me to anti-Semitism? Who are you hurting me? Why are you attacking me? I'm just a poor man from a poor family. You know, I'm going to go. He did feel like, you know, he was utterly shocked that anyone would accuse him as a. I mean, he must be a millionaire he must be wealthy.
Yeah, I think he's well off, so to say.
Well, I mean, he's not living in poverty, and and he doesn't understand why anyone would take issue with that. And his rhetoric was, I'm ranting on, I should let you speak in a minute, but I'm just saying, he's going on about, he's constantly going on about attacked, viciously attacked. It's all about hate, attack. There was another word he used, like smear. He's being smeared, you know, these kind of genuinely feels that he is a victim, you know, as you said.
Yeah. And that's that's his preferred way of getting attention, playing the victim, because he knows exactly why people are criticizing him. And he even read the stuff where people criticize him, where they specify what the issue is without attacking him. For example, we have an article from the SAA publication. It's a couple of years old now, but Jeb Card from the Florida University wrote an article named America Before as a Paranormal Charter, where he criticized Graham Hancock's then latest book, America Before, where he talk about the alternative history in the Americas. And he goes through all these issues he has with the sources, with the paranormal, theosophical sources that he based on. Donnelly and Card don't do, you know, personal stuff, calming out. He just lists, this is the issues, this is why he is wrong and problematic. And he even say that Graham Hancock is not trying to be an archaeologist. He is just a mythographer, basically. And Graham Hancock even liked this article. He read it, and he even mentioned it in his rebuttal to the SAS issue regarding his latest book, and sent it out, this article. So he read the critic, but he don't really take it to heart, because then he needs to change. And again, he can't play victim in that sense.
And we should, and I don't want to be, again, too personal and mean, but we have to talk about whether it's ignorance or like we see a lot of ignorance is deliberately cultivated, but the arrogance of, there were points where Hancock refers to his own website, and I've just put up a detailed analysis of, like, it's your own website, man. You've just written shit and put it on your own website, and you're talking about it as a credible source for your own discussion. And I mean, I reference my own stuff all the time, but not to say amazing new insights have been produced by, who is it? Howard Williams, publishing. Oh, I can't find it now. It's so complex, so many articles. No, he really does think that he is the word of God. There is that arrogance to it. There's that, you know, have you read my works? He says at one point, have you read my book? Well, and Flint says, yeah, a couple of them. And he goes, well, you know, I do want people to engage my work. Lots of footnotes. As it, you know, he really loves the academic kudos. Like, you know, we joke about that. We, you know, no one goes around comments and go, have you read my book? It's got lots of footnotes in it. You know, it'd be laughable and, you know, almost tragic if it wasn't, you know, deeply, you know, arrogant.
Yeah, and when you go and look up those footnotes, you realize that they don't reference what he's claiming that they are referencing. For example, he claims that there was one archaeologist who stole a huge amount of mica that was found in Teotihuacan, in the early 1900s, and he quote the author, and the author just say that the archaeologists found mica, but then Graham Hancock add that he stole it on top of it. So, I mean, just because you have footnotes, it doesn't really matter. But Hancock is not the only one who use his own sources to show that he's important. Recently, I looked into the Shroud of Turin, and I came across this field, syndology, the study of the shroud, and those authors are just as bad as quoting their own sources to give them respective veneer of credibility. So they often cite their own sources. So this is widely discussed, and you look into, oh, that's something you wrote before. So it's not only Hancock, but it's a common trope by these pseudo-sciences, so to say.
I mean, I want to hear your opinion on one point, because there's I wrote lots of points about the way Hancock builds his argument, which you probably, you've tackled, intimately familiar with, the denying of any evidence from the last ice age unless it fits, the underwater archaeology is only wrecks, Dibble really countered that point, not understanding the origins of agriculture, the breadth of geographical time and space that he's mashing together, all the time jumping, the disciplinary shift. He lives in the zone between geology and archaeology, so he draws on the geologists, and then when they disagree with him, he draws on the archaeologists. So all of those strategies, the use of old arguments, the crazy numerology and astronomy stuff. But the one thing that I thought I wanted to ask you specifically about that I really latched onto is just how effective he is at not saying anything. So I'm not saying that. I'm just asking the questions. The ambiguity that he's very, as a journalist, he's very much like a political journalist, political commentator. No, I'm not saying that all. And it's all, you can't pin him down. And perhaps that's why he's really a survivor, because he's a chameleon. He's constantly shifting, even in that conversation. He's at one point seeming to say they gave agriculture, this ancient civilization, destroyed in the Younger Dryas, and they spread around the world, sharing knowledge, not giving, sharing knowledge. But they didn't have agriculture. They just gave the ideas that allowed agriculture. I mean, it's so vague. It's utterly meaningless.
Yeah, as you say, that's something you recognize quite quickly if you start to go around the ancient alien, ancient astronaut, ancient everything sphere, because if they are too specific, you can call them out. If you're too specific, it's easy to look it up. I mean, internet has been quite hard for these paranormal pseudoscience writers, because before they could bring up some old book that you couldn't find because it was in Russian and only published in 3 examples. But now, with the digitalization of everything, you can go and pull out all those books that they used to love to cite and check them up. So what we see now is they are vaguer and vaguer in where they got the sources. For example, there's another guy out there, David Childress, who he always cites Russian or Arabic or Chinese sources because they were really hard to get in the 90s, obviously. Now you can get a translated copy of it within a few moments, basically, but he has gotten more vague. He doesn't really cite sources any longer. Hancock goes the other way. He just expects that you won't look them up. But it's also that they can shift blame. For example, Hancock in the show, or was it Dibble, who says that you don't promote aliens. But he did. He wrote a whole book about ancient aliens. He, I think it's season 1, episode 3 of the Ancient Aliens series, he's not saying that the aliens built the monuments, but they enhanced our DNA. So if we look at our DNA, we might be able to figure out what the aliens want to do with us and what our purpose in life was, because it was aliens who created the human race. So it's a little bit of evolutional denialism in this, on top of everything else. So, I mean, he says one thing, and then, again, you can pull it up, he will just water on the goes. I just shift focus to something else that I'm comfortable talking with and that you're not comfortable talking about. Something you saw in that episode quite a lot, as you mentioned, that he shift. Oh, now I'm in Indonesia, or now I'm in Egypt, and then I'm in Greece, I'm in Americas. And that way, I mean, you know that you can't be an expert on everything. And if you're not comfortable with Mesoamerican archaeology, then it will be hard to argue how Teotihuacan fit within the evolution of that society if you're focused on the Greek society that Flint is most comfortable with. That's why Graham Hancock didn't really speak a lot of Greece in this episode. If it ever come up except for Flint, because
I think Flint brought it up, but he kept absolutely clear of it. Egypt was the closest. There was no structure. History buff in the comments is saying that he thought that Rogan supported Dibble. I said it was mixed, but I thought at the end, both in the section about Central America, about the Maya, and I thought Rogan was totally unconvinced by Hancock and was really pushing back again, saying, no, but that's what colonizers do. They influence the culture and the society. And then at the end, I felt about Egypt, I felt that Rogan had got to himself to a point where he just said, yeah, but it's really amazing. How did they do that? I mean, it was just, he just kept repeating it, but like almost like someone who didn't quite believe what he was saying anymore. Like he was, what? I mean, in other words, I almost felt that not necessarily because Flint had given him, had rhetorically argued him to a standstill, but just because clear evidence is not compelling in any regard for it being a 12,000-year-old Sphinx. And all this astronomical stuff, I think, just went over Rogan's head. And I think Rogan at the end, as a presenter, was going, yeah, maybe I should have more archaeologists on here. I mean, so my only hope is that maybe there's a glimmer in Rogan's brain that maybe he needs to get more archaeologists on in future, not necessarily Flint Dibble, but or not necessarily to debate Hancock, but maybe, just maybe one episode in 2,500 or whatever it is, you could have an archaeologist on just to talk about archaeology. Maybe that's the real moment that we need to get, fist punch the air and just go, yeah, we've arrived. Joe Rogan's willing to entertain talking to an archaeologist about archaeology, but maybe we're not there yet. But maybe there's a hope there, because there was a few moments where I thought Rogan was going, this is all bullshit, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to really know, but I mean, he has a lot of pseudo-historians, pseudo-scientists on his show, and he had a few real, but that's the thing with Joe Rogan, he puts everyone on except historians and archaeologists for some reason. But otherwise, I think, haven't Neil deGrasse Tyson been on there once or twice? But I mean, we need more media personalities. In that sense, big names that are actually doing public speaking, like Neil deGrasse Tyson. We just need our archaeological version of him. And I know there's a lot of archaeologists that doing great content that we should be able to have one or twice, or host multi-million documentaries on Netflix and everything. In that sense, but we I don't know, we just don't have that name yet.
Well, I don't know. Jennifer Cottrell asks, what if archaeologists had their own branch of marketing? Well, I know there's past preservers based in Egypt, Nigel Hetherington, who does sort of basically media interface business with various archaeology presenters. And there are quite a lot of effective archaeological communicators. I mean, out there. I mean, Tash Bilson on this app, Natasha Bilson on this app. She's one of the 3 presenters. She has a TikTok account, conspiracy theories, anti-vaxxers, and, shouting at the world on GB News. But there are still some people who haven't gone that way that we could. But it's frankly, the problem with someone like Flint, I fear, is that he's now going to be the go-to person for everything. And that's no disrespect to him, but none of us should be. I shouldn't be the go-to person. It should be a shared responsibility that, good communicators should, step up when they can to do these things. So hopefully, I hope he doesn't get too much flack for it. And, to be honest, it should be about other people now. It should be, Hancock bye Hancock. Let's not talk about him anymore. I feel just, that we did that, but it'd be good if there were some more of these high profile venues where others, younger, communicators would be given a venue. I don't know. Maybe I'm naive.
No, I think, but you're right. We need more younger people, new people who can take place and do TED Talks, be in the media. But that's a little bit of our issue. We need to, pseudo-archaeology, it's sexy in a way. It sells headlines, it pulls clicks and everything, but we need to figure out how we can apply their good way of getting clickbait headlines, but for the archaeology discoveries we have. And there's a few examples, not maybe the best examples, but for example, he who claimed to have found the famous Viking Jomsborg in Poland. He got enormous headlines, but he barely concluded his excavation when he went out to the media, claiming that he had found the Jomsborg. But he got a lot of attention, and I think he got quite good funding out of it in Poland. But that's a different thing. But if we can get this, but maybe not too, there need to be a fine line between the clickbait and what we actually have communicated and found, so to say. But we need to kind of cheat and look at what they're doing and try to apply it to our own stuff, so we get more attention that way.
I think so. Is there any other particular point, Fredrik, that you wanted to share about your, because a lot of it was predictable and like old story for you in terms of is there anything else we've missed in terms of, key takeaways you've got that other people would benefit from? Because
while it's easy to call him a racist, it's kind of what he thrives on, so to say. And we have to remember that his bread and butter is to be the victim, and we kind of have to stop allowing him to be the victim, which meaning that we kind of have to approach him with a sort of empathy in that sense, because it will take the air out of his, like you said in the end, where he agreed that we need more funding and it's a shame that there's looting, all that. That's when he couldn't play the victim any longer and have to, admit that, these are good ideas. And taking a little bit of that wind out of him will, halt his progression, as we see with Van Daniken and those other still famous names, but they don't get the media attention any longer. Tsoukalos is famous from his hair and appearance of ancient aliens, but he don't get headlines anymore. It's rare you see him in the newspaper. Same with Van Daniken. He was big before, but now he's, disappearing into the periphery somewhere. If you want, you can go on a vacation with Van Daniken for like $10,000.
Oh, really?
And get a guided tour with him several days. I have this idea that we should just book him full with archaeology, so just pester him for a week, but
and watch him cry. Yes, there's the abuse of. There's two sides to it. So there's the abuse of Hancock, and we've got to be careful about where and how we frame that. And I'm going to another point, but I did want to say I want to recognise there were multiple points in his narrative where, frankly, what he was saying was just overtly racist. He was going on about the Olmec heads. They look Polynesian. They look African. That is, if Flint, I'm not blaming him, but I'm saying if you wanted a break, a moment where you say, look, Graham, you say you're really upset about being called a white supremacist, and here you are looking at some sculptures. And Flint did say, they're Olmec, but at the end of the day, there were other moments. But I do take on board your point that, calling people the names and labels can backfire and just lead to sympathy and support for them. But then there's the other side, the big archaeology. Now, whether by design or by, he didn't understand. He read out a tweet by Flint Dibble using big archaeology in quotes, obviously in sarcasm. And Hancock generally seemed to not understand that was a parody. And says, well, you seem to be admitting there's a big archaeology here. And, was that a moment of stupidity, or was that a feigned faux? Oh, look, but either way, it was, this idea of a big archaeology. Look at the many victims of they won't listen. They're closed-minded. They will attack anyone viciously. It's this idea. Do you think there's any truth in that? Because Flint seemed to concede there are arseholes in every field, but I mean, what's your take on that?
But he is referring to I'm so bad at American archaeology. What was it called? Those arrowheads in America.
Clovis Point?
Yeah, the Clovis Point. And it kind of was, a certain group of people who tried to keep down new information or dismiss it as inaccurate. But the Clovis Point haven't been a thing in archaeology for 30 years in that sense that he described it. And same with the decryption of the Mayan language. You have this Thompson guy that kind of trying to keep the new ideas out because he felt he was the right person and his ideas were the big ideas. He was the expert, and we have had these very specialized experts in our field in the past. It's not really the same today, but I mean, that was kind of what Graham Hancock criticizing, but he's criticizing that's a thing that isn't in the same way any longer. So archaeology did struggle for some time that we had these people up there that were talking down to new discoveries because they felt threatened in their work. And while it happens, I mean, it's not the normal occurrences. I think you don't really see it in your day-to-day job, I hope, that you have one expert that's trying to control the narrative and the new research. But I think that's also an issue with our field, that we often work alone when we publish things. I think they're changing, but I think we need to work more in teams and groups when doing papers, and we shouldn't have our own niche, so to say. We're all trying to find that specific niche that we're very good at, but we kind of need to spread out at the same time.
Well, I have a different answer to that myself. I don't know if I should go into it here, but I have experienced various different problems outside of the archaeology discipline with other cognate fields, but also I do perceive, perhaps because I am British, I see a difference between Scandinavian archaeology, German archaeology, French, and British and American and Canadian archaeology. And I think I'm not saying there's the same problem, but there are national or regional cliques that do act in very defensive and dismissive ways to those from outside. And I think, at least from a British perspective, I know that we're seen as horrible and rude to everyone else, but I always think that the US-Canadian academic dynamic can be really quite vicious at times. And again, that's my perspective, because maybe maybe they think the same about British archaeology, but I've certainly encountered, some very strong, and I've heard of other people experiencing very strong personalized attacks on the regular in early medieval archaeology and medieval studies more broadly. But I don't think it's ever concerted like the witch hunt, the crusade. We do reserve that for external, forces, I tend to think. I don't know. But certainly I think if it serves his purpose. It serves his purpose. It has for 30 years. He may have been genuinely upset at various points, but honestly, can he hardly, I don't know. I don't know. Has he really tried to go into an archaeological conference? Has anyone invited him? I don't know. We had the famous thing in Sweden where Cornelius at Kalmar invited the Bosnian pyramid dude. Do you remember that one? Or was that before your time?
I think it was, or when I went to university, it was big with the Bosnian pyramids. But they don't want to be in that area because they would be too threatened. I think Hancock would maybe like it. I'm not sure if he would appear. He would like the invitation maybe, but then he would most likely make some demand that he needs to speak and he can't be questioned.
Yeah.
He needs a lecture, but he can't answer questions afterward because, I mean, he won't be able to tackle archaeological conference questions after doing a presentation on his work at all without it going sideways in that sense. So while he might like the idea, he most likely will do as he always do. I'm a victim afterward. Oh, they invited me, but they didn't want to, listen to my request on doing this. Same with the debate stuff. He said, oh, nobody wants to debate me, but there was several other than Flint who actually made an offer, but they weren't big enough for him. Again, he does this for attention. He wants the biggest most famous internet archaeologist out there. And Flint has a good following on Twitter, but that's why he got selected in contrast to the other archaeologists that might be better suited because they were younger, they were more knowledgeable about the pseudo history stuff. As I mentioned, he has done a lot of pseudo stuff that's quite problematic, but that you might not know if you just read his website or listen to his Twitter feed or documentary, because as I said, he has this whole anti-Semitic David Icke book where he, the use is behind every dark stuff kind of thing out there. So he tries to form the narratives to his preference because he is at a position of power where he can do that currently.
So, big question then, would you have gone on?
Me? No, I'm lousy at debates that.
I think if it was if it was linked to something a geographical, chronological topic, it was actually some meaningful, let's look at Viking Age warfare. I'm not my expertise, but if it was anything, if it was, what do we know about the end of Roman Britain? And there was and you had some pseudo-archaeological debate about Arthur or something. I could almost imagine myself being part of a panel, not me as the expert, them as the, I could imagine contributing to something like that, but not that type of thing. And not for 4.5 hours. And the pretentiousness of all the things, this is the thing I find really funny. Of all the conferences I've been to that have been really insufferably pretentious, with the venue, the introductions, and let's say Americans love a long introduction, biographical introduction for speakers. And I've come across this elsewhere too. It's not Brits are some of the places, Oxford and Cambridge. It's just hilarious, sort of weird little niches in British culture. Nothing is as pretentious as sitting around with huge microphones for 4.5 hours, agonizing over HTML links and, I can't find it. And Joe Rogan had to tell Graham Hancock at one point, if you press Control F, you can usually search documents. It's like that level. It's almost like celebrating their inability to use basic tech.
Yeah,
I just thought,
But all his shows is like that. It's just a very long format without saying anything. I'm not sure how he really got so popular, but I guess it depends on the guest and all of that. But yeah, it's very long and very rambling kind of interview. He isn't really a good interviewer either.
No, he didn't steer it anywhere. 4.5 hours of no steer. Just him sitting there going, and I can't, that's why I said at the beginning and before I don't know if you heard it, but I was just ranting at the beginning, but it was unprofessional in the sense of just rambling. It was just, there was no coherent structure. Like, we're going to discuss this, like this, actually. It's like this, but we've been only going, what, the hypocrisy. I've been going an hour and 15, but come on, we've got 3.5. We've got to beat them. No, we're not going to go on that long. But it's the pretentiousness of sitting in a studio just because you've got some curtains behind you and a few computers that gives you the aura that, I will hold court. It's like a medieval parody of a medieval sort of king sitting there. We will make everyone who's cooking the meal, everyone that's holding the door, they've got to wait while we have our really important conversation, and it's just really pretentious. I thought it was just, I don't know. I just thought the whole, people are already mocking this, aren't they? But in 5-10 years time, I wonder what they'll think of Joe Rogan and who watched it. Will people be saying like, I remember once I watched an entire episode,
I don't think most, except the hardcore fans, watch the whole thing, because he also put out clips. That's why I say soundbites are important, because already you have these clips of the different sections floating out there. So he makes this long and then he cut it afterwards, the best good parts. So if
fair enough.
Soundbites, you won't really end up in the things that will be circulated in the social media that people actually will see and go and follow him for, so to say. So I think it's rare that they look at the whole thing, except the hardcore stuff, but then it's cut up additionally later on. So I had this 5-minute little sound bites that he can put out in clips for form online.
But the final thing I wanted to say was, I don't know if you got to the bit, but he's really butthurt about Gunung Padang. And as I predicted, he is now using this as oh, look at me, they don't want me. But I'm still frustrated, and Flint brought this up, that it's retracted, but still fully available. I don't understand. What's the point in retracting something, but still having it fully available on the website of the Geoprospection Journal? Do you have any insight into what's going on there? Why would you retract it, but still have it on display with the words retracted? I mean,
because they get traffic by it. I think that's why they published it. Even, I mean, that it went through peer review from the beginning is just incomprehensible, because if you understand the site, if you understand how you excavate a site, how you take carbon samples from the site, you should have realized that everything was just wrong. They had 3 core samples and just tested organic materials within it. And I mean, the worst part of that is they have spent, I don't know how much money on it, because they got unlimited funding from the state government to do the excavation. And all we got was 3 core carbon samples. That's it. Of it. And the destruction is not really known there, but I think they still have it up because, frankly, it gives them views, it gives them click, it puts the journal out there.
And Bambi's asked a really good question. Will they ever name who did the peer review? I don't think they will. It wasn't me. It wasn't me, Although I will share something that I have this year already rejected multiple papers as an anonymous peer review on nothing to do with Indonesia, nothing to do with, but papers that are really great ideas, but are just not there. And that's part of our role. If we are invited, if I take on that role, I'm not paid for it, but if I'm going to evaluate, I give an honest appraisal. And I see a lot of younger academics rightly saying, oh, it's mean old academics. But frankly, I'd rather we were mean old academics and let the kind of bullshit that goes through that hasn't even been read. I mean, I don't think it was ever properly peer reviewed by any archaeologist. I think that's the point they make, is it's geologists did it, didn't they? They think they gave it to the wrong discipline to evaluate. But even so,
Yeah, but as you say, we should reject more papers, because, I mean, I look at a lot of papers when doing my episode, and especially with Syndonology, it's really opened my eyes to bad publishing. There's so many bad Turin Shroud papers out there that don't really support their conclusion. Their sources doesn't really say what the authors say they do, and they still go into archaeological or historical journals and don't really get challenged for some reason. because nobody read them, but the author can go and say, oh, I'm published in this archaeological journal. I'm a physicist, but I speak about the archaeological stuff that I don't understand. And, we should reject more in general.
I think so. I mean, as an editor, and I've edited 11 books, and I was an honorary editor for the Royal Archaeological Institute, so I edited their journal for 5 years, 6 volumes. They had to catch up, so I did an extra volume, and I edit my own journal now, and I have published things. I mean, I haven't. It's not my decision alone. Peer review. There are things that have been published that I have suspected shouldn't have gone through, and there's a few things where I think this is utterly wrong, doesn't work, I don't agree with it, but the peer reviewers like it, and it's mostly harmless, and it's airing a perspective that hasn't been addressed before. So there's lots of different judgment calls being made, but there are a small number of things that I've published with my name on as editor that I'm uncomfortable with, but nowhere near the level of it's the earliest evidence of of first evidence of burial, Homo naledi. Nothing like evidence of civilization. Nothing like that, guys. I'm talking about. But I think we do need rigorous standards and rigorous expectations rather than just I fear some of our biggest journals are the worst for this, without naming names. And I think that some of the big publishers are literally, while I defend peer review all the time, I think there are some journals where I've peer reviewed something. I've said this needs major revisions, and I've seen the published article and I go, oh, look, they've changed 2 sentences in the conclusion. And you go, I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not, they haven't engaged. The authors have just gone, yeah, whatever, we'll publish it anyway,
Yeah, but I think we need to pay more attention to it, as you say, because it will reflect back and might have consequences like the Gunung Padang paper
absolutely
have had. So I think it's important to have in mind if you ever are in a peer review position or editor position, so to say. Yeah.
And particularly, I mean, I don't know anything about that site. Well, I don't now do, but like it's hardly a secret site. It's a site. If it's a site that's has a history of association with pseudo-archaeology, that should be a warning sign, a warning bell that if you're, and the dates alone, I mean, it's not exactly hidden. It should have been really clear to any editor who bothered to even look at it. Anyway.
Yeah.
What can I say?
I mean, no idea how that went through. It's a mystery because if you read it, it's really shows that they wanted a conclusion and they went backward from it, trying to find what fitted their preferred narrative.
Stina asks, would it be better if peer reviewers were paid? Yes, I think it would. I also think it would be better if peer reviewers, while they, I think anonymous, some people say they want open review. I'm not so sure. I think protecting peer reviewers, if they're doing a job from abuse and threats, is part of the anonymity should be. But I do think that there should be some accountability. Like the journal, in this case, there should be some, what the heck did you do? I mean, you can't blame just the peer reviewers, because even if the peer reviewers just said, yeah, publish it, the editor should still have looked at the paper themselves, or editors, and goes back to Fredrik's point about collaboration, whether it's actually research or it's editorial. If we're sharing the load, if we're actually balancing it out, then more eyes get to look at it and less mistakes should hopefully be made. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when it's newer things, we need to be quite careful in general. And I mean, I understand that you want to get result and you want attention, but while it's easy to blame the peer reviewer, we have no idea what they actually said about the Gunung Padang paper. If they reacted, if they did any changes before publishing. I mean, it might just be the publisher just trying to, get some extra sales from it.
I mean, this is the big final question here that History Buff is asking, perhaps. Do we think this debate is good for history archaeology, given the popularity of Rogan, or does it make us look like a laughing stock, or is it bad for us to be seen in association with these pseudo-archaeologists? What do you think, Fredrik?
I mean, I question how big effect it will have, because if we look at the demographic of Joe Rogan's audience, it's what I saw, like 80% conservative men in the US, and they aren't really keen on maybe getting, the more progressive archaeological reports that we promoting. I know that my show up somewhere in the end on some go out.
It did. You got recommended twice for your podcast and for your YouTube.
Yeah. So, I mean, I haven't seen much from that, but I mean, it's recent. I'm not sure if everybody get to the end either, but I mean, I think for Flint, it will be good for him. I think he will get more attention, better or worse. But in general, I think we don't see much change from that specific audience because they are not the target audience that you and me engage with, for example. I don't think they would go and listen to my stuff because I will be too progressive for their values and views. What it might help is they get names out to people who struggle with family members who have these views. That might be a resource for someone. But other than that, I'm unsure. I don't think it was the worst thing that's happened to archaeology. I don't think it will be the greatest thing either. I mean, I think it's good for Flint, and I think he will get more attention forward from it, which he's a good researcher, so that's not bad inherently, but I think that will be the main result after this.
And maybe I can exploit this by setting this as a essay question for my students next year in public archaeology, and they have to watch all 4 hours, 26 minutes. I did it, so I'm going to make them do it. But no, seriously, it's been great talking, and I need to go and eat and sleep, but and I'm sure you have similar things to do, but I really appreciate it. At short notice too, Fredrik, and I'm sorry I didn't get my act together. I didn't know about this until yesterday evening. I went, oh, that debate's finally happened, because I knew something was going on, but
I should have expected, since the SAA conference is this weekend, so I guess Flint was going on that anyway, but I had completely missed also that it was actually going to be this date, but yeah.
But no, that was really interesting. So thank you so much for contributing, because as I've made very clear, this isn't my primary focus, but I felt both, I feel depressed and elated that I managed to get through it. And well, thank you, Fredrik, and thank you, audience, for your great questions, your patience. We've had over 40 people here at various points, which is really quite a healthy little community. And
thank you, Professor Williams, for having me and having this discussion with me. If you want to see more of Professor Williams, his channel is ArchPodNet on YouTube and on TikTok, and you find links to his stuff further down in the show notes, as usual. Now this will close out the episode, but don't fear. Next time we will visit the ancient Maya, and we will have some guests. So it will be the Mayans in May. But until then, please spread the word by leaving a positive review on platforms like iTunes, Spotify, or among your friends. Recommend them an episode. Get them hooked on this show. For more information about me or the podcast, check out diggingupancientaliens.com, where you also find sources and resources or reading recommendations if you want to learn more about the stuff I brought up in this episode. If you want to support the show, you can do that on patreon.com/diggingupancientaliens, or head over to the member site if you don't want to use Patreon. You find that on diggingupancientaliens.com/support. And you can also head over to the archaeologicalpodcastnetwork.com, where you can find all the other shows in the network, and also make sure to go and listen to Andrew Kinkella's take on this debate. And if you want to contact me, well, that can be done through most social media sites. And if you have any comments or corrections, or, well, you didn't like this at all, you can write me on Fredrik@diggingupancientaliens.com. Sandra Martelor created the intro music, and our outro is by the band called Trallskruv, who sings their song Tinfoil Hat. Links to both of these artists can be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep shoveling that science.
Men jag skyddar mig för jag har foliehatt. Och så säger ni det är en galen fantasi att ingen manipulerar oss med telepati. Ni tycker att jag redan är besatt, men jag skyddar mig för jag har foliehatt.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. Remember that we have a subscription going on. You can become a patron or other subscriber for as little as $2.50 per episode. Go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support. That is, go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support to read more information and sign up right there.